Facebook, 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 and we're just waiting on YouTube. Okay, so you know what? I am just going to play the intro and allow people time to come in, and then I'll.
Okay. Sounds good.
Then I'm going to hand it over to you. All right. So just.
All right.
Your microphones are live while the music's playing. It's only 1 minute and 20 seconds. All right. Boom.
Okay. Where's my friend? Good morning, everybody. Just making sure I can do a mic check. I don't see our guest, Mr. Medina.
He's disappeared.
Oh dear. Okay.
Let me turn my video back on. Yeah, he's disappeared. I'm not sure what's happened to him. He's let's see if we can do something here to help him there. Now I'm looking at him. He's Saeed, can you hear us? No. Something's happened with his. Let me see if he's over here. No. No. I'm not sure what's happened. I can see him on the screen.
Can he hear us?
Yeah, Saeed, if you can hear us, can you go out and come back in? Yeah, it's his signal. It's his signal.
Oh, it's his signal. Okay.
Yeah, he's I see him on the screen on the phone. Yeah, his signal. It's his signal. I can tell. Yeah, okay. So Morgan just told him to go out and come back in. Let's see if that works. Okay.
So just be a second. Hello, everybody. My name is Nguyen. I am the guest moderator today for SOULSPEAKS 5D on the Soulology Studio platform. Mr. Medina is hanging out in the background taking care of tech, which is great because I really hate that part of everything. But our guest is just MIA. We're trying to get him online and do a short introduction. I believe your name is pronounced Saeed or Syed, so you'll have to correct me when we get you back on. And you actually are based in Egypt, which is super exciting. I know there are so many people out there right now that love Egypt for everything that it symbolizes in terms of their own personal journey. And one of the great things about, well, I don't know if it's great, but one of the things about Syed that is how I came to discover him is he actually has been hosting rituals in Egypt for, I believe, almost over a month there. So he has that common connection. And I usually like checking in on my buddy, Rick, because if you don't know, Rick actually was based in Vancouver, BC, Canada as well, where I am. And he was living in his camper at the back of my place here for probably almost a year. So I got to know him really well. So I like to stalk him on his global journey as he works on his mission. And he's met some amazing people, amazing souls on his journey. And one of these amazing souls is Syed. So as soon as he gets on, we'll start the conversation. But today has been interesting, actually, I was going to say this week has been quite interesting. So I'd love to hear what his thoughts are on that. And you are totally not Saeed. Where's
Well,
our friend?
I am about a quarter Middle Eastern.
Quarter Middle Eastern. Which part?
I think Lebanon, Syria, that area. I'm not quite sure. We kind of have a drop in the genealogy, but yeah, my grandfather came from he came from Mexico City, but his grandparents immigrated from, I think, Lebanon, but I think it's around Lebanon, Syria. I think they share a border. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, they called him Avila in Spanish. That means Arab.
Huh?
He says his internet is very bad. He has gone out to come back in.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah. So yeah, anyway, so my what would that be? My great grandparents came from the Middle East, and my grandfather was born in Mexico City, and he grew up in a whorehouse. It's very
cool. Wow.
He stopped going to school when he was like 8 years old, and interesting. Yeah, interesting.
What a colorful lineage you have.
Yeah, he was a rogue frequency. Just put it that way. So I guess we're just gonna have to wing it till Saeed comes back through. Hopefully he'll have good internet. But if not, I'll leave it up to you. You are not a guest moderator, by the way. You are the second host or moderator of Soul Speaks 5D.
Second host. Oh, well, you can call me whatever you want. I really don't care. Call me whatever you want. Just don't call me a divine twin. That's all I can say.
Right. He's going to go, he's going to try on his phone. So yeah, what were you saying? This past weekend was pretty intense. Is that what you're saying?
This past weekend, I feel like there has been a lot of alchemy involved in terms of our actual physical vessel. Like I can literally feel things move around in my body. It's very strange. I'm somehow connected to Shanine's baby because I get these phantom baby kicks in my stomach. And I wasn't really sure what I was doing. I'm like, am I birthing an alien? And as soon as I asked that question out loud, Shanine's baby came through. It's like, no, it's me. And apparently, yeah. So for whatever reason, I am connected to her. So I was going through that, and then there was just been moments of vertigo where it's like all of a sudden I'm just a little unbalanced. Like I'm stable for sure, but like physically unbalanced is a new sensation for me, where you just kind of like wobbly, and then vision gets a little bit blurry, lots of headaches coming through, and I woke up this morning starving. So I feel like it's been, I think a lot of people are experiencing body stuff, and that body stuff is really alchemizing with whatever, it's like integrating that new frequency. So if you're kind of open to that, it's not COVID-19, people, all right? It's basically the incoming energy is very different. So your body is trying to integrate this. So there's a period of uncomfortableness that comes with it. And I think whatever systems that usually you're hypersensitive to, so for me, it's usually my stomach and my head. Any incoming energy, those are the two systems, like body systems, that signal to me that there's something more going on than just like eating bad food, right? So yeah, for this weekend, that's but it at least I'm out of lockdown, because for 3.5 weeks, almost a month now, I was kind of like in an energetic lockdown where I couldn't do anything, and anything I did do, I just failed miserably, so I just gave up.
He wants to call him. He's trying on his phone now and he doesn't know what to do.
All right, are we going to talk our friend through it?
I'm gonna call him on the phone. You keep talking.
Okay, yeah. So it's one of those things where for about a month, the dragons, it was interesting. When I left Mexico, I did get the message that we're on lockdown, and I just assumed it was a COVID-19 related. I'm like, okay, whatever. The whole global scenario is on lockdown. That's great. Nothing new there. So I didn't think it was a big deal. But then when I started going through the motion, and upon reflection, I realized they were saying I was on lockdown for whatever reason. So I had a really rough 3.5 weeks personally. Like I went through so much rage and anxiety and crying, like I'm so uncomfortable with crying, and went through all of that. And it's been really hard. And I know for those way showers who've done a lot of the detaching already, so for example, Todd and Morgan there, they've done a lot of letting go of old systems that don't work for them. I haven't really been doing that personally. So for the last 3.5 weeks, it's like crunch time for me. I had to like condense all that in 3.5 weeks. So it was like intense boot camp, where every day I was just like, what's the point? What's the point of going on? And yeah, just muddle my way through it. And then I would say probably Thursday, this past Thursday, all of a sudden that got lifted. Like I can feel the restriction just lift off me. And I got the message that, okay, you're free. You're not in lockdown mode. And then I recognized, I was like, oh, you bastards, man, you put me back in lockdown mode for 3.5 weeks. But I didn't realize it was, that's what they meant. Like I could not move forward. I could not move backwards. I could not move forward until I moved backwards. That's what it was. So I was not allowed to proceed in any motion that would appear that I'm actually doing well. There was none of that. It was all the stuff that perhaps I was spiritually bypassing and not being frank and honest about. I had to go through and loop it and loop it and loop it and get through it. So it was, but then it kind of clicked in on Thursday, and this weekend, energetically clicked in on Thursday, and this weekend physically it's clicking in, because there's other things that are happening with the body, which I haven't really figured out yet, but there's definitely, there are definitely lots of interesting body stuff. I don't know. How about you?
Well, no,
I know you've been moving furniture a lot.
I'm not saying anything about that. So like I was nauseated. Morgan got nauseated. I mean, that hung around for a little bit. Yeah, I've had a lot of body stuff. What I'm noticing is that every morning when I get up, I have like the body's, just clearing stuff out. Like I had to take a shower this morning, and I took one late yesterday, but I had to, because I felt like I was just purging, through my pores of my skin. I don't know.
Are you burning up?
I was burning up last night big time, but then again, I was laying in bed next to a goddess, so that's not out of the ordinary.
Wah, wah, wah.
No, I was burning up last night. I couldn't, I tried to sleep with the blankets on me, and I couldn't do it, man. I had to like take the blankets off and the sheets off, and we were connecting, and it was just getting worse and worse, but yeah. And then there was something else she said, I think is really important, or at least something we can all look out for. Like well, you used the term spiritually bypassing. But what I'm noticing is there's a lot of expressions of projection. I don't mean in a bad way, although sometimes it's projected to somebody external or something external. That's that kind of like that whole, well, they're over identifying with a certain point of view. All right. Like over identifying with a narrative. Like, in other words, they're like going, okay, this is true, and if you don't believe this is true, then I'm going to unfriend you off my page. Or, I mean, I'm being kind of extreme, but so I see that. And then the other thing I'm seeing is we're basically, hey, I'm okay, I got it figured out, and,
yeah,
kind of a frequency like that. And I'm like, oh, that's a big sign. For me, I know that's a big sign. Like anytime I'd say, oh, I'm okay. No, I'm not okay. There's something something needs to be aligned. And I think you're right. I think it is basically spiritual bypassing. And even though that might sound kind of harsh, but it's just it's the unconscious stuff that we're unconscious of within ourselves is being shown to us. And it's there's no doubt. So I see a lot of people transforming, which is kind of cool. You can see them transforming by the posts they do, and it's interesting. It really is.
So where's he's coming back on, or is he not coming back on? What's the story there?
I don't know if he has the
this
Yeah, I
the
don't think he,
bandwidth to do
yeah,
it. Okay.
yeah, that's why his, yeah. So that's okay. And even when I did a show with Rick the last time, he was in and out.
Yeah.
So it's up to you. What do you want to do? It's 1:11 in the East Coast as we speak right
Ah.
now.
Yeah, it's still early morning here. So, yeah, no, we can go on and catch up. So basically okay. Basically, I would say we are entering a phase. Well, Tien and I do a show called Dragon's Mouth. I haven't done the show for 2 weeks because I was feeling like shit. And I just felt like if I came on camera, it would just be verbal diarrhea and it's not good for anybody. So I thought I'd stay off camera. So one of the things that we were talking about is Tien was picking up on a high frequency of creation. So once you get through the goo, like all the personal muck. So if you do the deep dive into yourself and basically tune out all your external influences, whether, like you were saying, Todd, if you are over identifying or just deeply attached to one particular narrative, that it doesn't give you any space to create a narrative that maybe is so awesome you feel like you're not even deserving of that narrative, right? So that's one of the things is people are in a comfortable zone. So when your comfort zone starts breaking down, whether it be like you're used to always having full access to as much toilet paper as you want, as a woman, I don't want to feel like I'm lacking toilet paper. That hyperventilates me, especially for a person that has like tiny bladder and I pee every, 30 minutes, like I'm pregnant. That stuff, like, just, it's one of those things where it's just like you hold on to those comfort pieces for so tightly that there's all your energy is hyper focused on it, and you don't see the beautiful potentiality of your reality. Like, people can't wrap their heads around their ultimate like heart song of, maybe I don't need to work in a soul sucking job that 9 to 5, pay taxes and then die. Maybe this next step of reality is so crazily different that you have to just kind of, the best position to be is to coast it, to kind of lean into it. It's harder for anyone that has control issues for me to do that. I mean, I say it well, but in practice, I'm like a hot mess, right? Letting go of that control is hard for me. And I always have to like remind myself, I need to let this go. If it's not grooving, if it doesn't come with grace and ease, I need to let it go. Yeah. And for the last 3.5 weeks, I've been fighting for, I don't know what the hell I was fighting for, but I've been fighting for something that is comfortable. And it's really hard to come out and say, you know what? Okay, fine. And that's just because I have that warrior template. Like, you can probably relate to that. You just have a need to be really dramatic and fight it, right? Like, you're not one of those people that are just not going to give it up until you're beaten down. And then you're like, okay, fine, you win. What's next? And so I think when that happened on Thursday, things started clicking in. And things clicked in big time. Like, it wasn't like small stuff where I found toilet paper. It was like big stuff where I had access to, like, holy crap, I can't believe I can actually do this. So in Canada, we have our Prime Minister is basically throwing money at us out of thin air. It's so magical. And I used to laugh at Rick Jewers because he used to always talk about the RV. So that's basically the monetary reset. And I would be like, how? Because, I'm so monetarily based. Like, I'm driven that way. Yeah. Money makes me happy. Making money makes me happy. Everything about money makes me happy. And it's one of those things where I'm like, you can't. And I remember Rick saying, it's just going to come out of thin air. I'm like, you can't make money come out of thin air. Dude, this is the 3D world. Like, how's that going to happen? And he goes, it's just going to come out. You're just going to be given money to live just because you want to.
Okay. This is a really good subject. Let's just talk about this for a second.
Sure.
So, okay. First of all, money doesn't come out of thin air, but it does. They are brothers and sisters who have been controlling the Federal Reserve. We'll just limit it to that. Have been printing money hugely for 100 years. All right. So here's my problem with Gasara, Nasara, the RV, and all that crap. All right. $1,200 ain't shit. Okay. Unemployment, whatever, it doesn't matter. If they had the ability, which they did, and they exercised to print as much money as they needed for everything that they wanted, okay,
Mhm.
then why in the hell couldn't we just print all the money we need and hand it out to every person on the face of the earth? Okay. So I don't buy that these stimulus checks are the precursor to Nasara. If you've been able to print unlimited amounts of money, and I know there's inflation aspects to it, but deal with it. If you've been able to and have utilized it for yourself and your own initiatives, why can't you just print all the money you need and give it to everybody? Give everybody $100,000 and go home.
Mhm.
So I don't buy it. I don't know. I think it's another narrative that's been around a long time that people, I think it's it's a distraction. It's another distraction. That's why I'm not against Q, the movement of Q, but I see where it's taking people's power away and it's creating separation because you're either pro Q or you're not. You either believe or you don't. And that what's the difference between that and any type of organized religion or any kind of nationalism or sexism or whatever, you know. Saeed says, Morgan says Saeed's in the room, but he's not coming through. So he must not
Oh,
have,
do we
he
see him?
must, no, I can't see him. So
Oh,
I
okay.
guess he doesn't have enough signal. So I think she can hear me. I think she's on. So if you could, Morgan, if you could just let him know that he doesn't have a strong enough signal, and we'll try again some other time, and I'll change the heading on the live. She's got something here that we've been working on. I'm just going to go ahead and say it right now since you give me shit about it. 0 point. Todd said 0 point again. But so Sunday, which is that this Sunday? Yeah, Sunday the 26th in the late afternoon Eastern time. So that'll be the evening in Europe. That'll be early morning down under. We're going to do a Zoom room gathering. Okay, so this is a deal where we can have up to 103 people in the room in Zoom.
Okay.
And so this topic is going to be zero pointing old programming. Another name for thorough shadow work. We'll be putting the link up in the invitation. It will be 5 p.m. Sunday, and we'll go for 2 hours. It'll be Morgan and I on the screen. And so this goes, I think she wrote that because of what you just said, like what you just went through and these things that were coming up and the whole thing about going backwards before you can go forward. This is the same process, I guess, that
Yes.
you were describing, but she's obviously over 20 years developed a very, actually a very simple method. It's not painless all the time, but it gets the job done. And I think one thing that we've learned, whether we're talking about an individual or even I'm looking at the collective going, oh wait, we're fixing to go deep here, which means we're going to have a huge expansion. I don't think we're going to have that expansion until everybody owns everything, which is where, the distortion, to me, the distortions that suck our power away, such as over identifying or being too pro, whether it be RV, nationalism, Q, Satanism, doesn't even matter. Whatever it is, it's taken too much of our power, which means we're avoiding something. We're not taking responsibility or we're separating ourselves from something. But so that's what it's going to be about. And I'll put some announcements out. I just found out about this as we're sitting here talking.
It's coming live straight from Tom Medina's desk via Morgan's phone. No, I love that because one of the things is when, like, I recognized parts of what I was going through. I obviously am not privy to the full process, otherwise I wouldn't go through it, right? It's one of those things, if you know the end journey, you're not going to go through it. You're just going to skip and miss that beat and go straight to the end. But there are so many people, and I have a very different background than most of the members in this community. I was not in a suppressed environment. Our cultural background, my dad's upbringing is basically primed for this time period. So in our cultural background, my shedding is, ironically, my shedding is my own creation. It has nothing to do with ancestral lineage, Akashic records, because I haven't even been on this planet very long. I think I've been here for maybe one full turn, sometime in Atlantis, and that was it. And I came back here just to finish the job that I didn't do in Atlantis. So I don't carry any of that baggage. I don't have this dramatic story like yourself, Todd, where you had to go through every class of dark night of the soul. I think you hit every category on your journey. And so it's great. You and Morgan are amazing ambassadors for that human hybrid of narrative where you can identify with everything, right? I can't walk, have not walked in your shoes. My parents have, so they've done all that for me. So the only thing left for me is to create out of pure creation. There's nothing stopping me except myself.
Yeah.
So for the last 3.5 weeks, even with all of that, you would say, oh, well, she's pretty stacked, when it comes to esoterics. No, it's still shit, okay? Let me just tell you about that. Even though I don't have any of that, I don't have to crumble all of these huge, basically traumatic events. One of the things I do need to crumble down is my little life. So whatever that looks like. So this little life that I created, so, a mortgage, kids, husband, family, that little life is my core life. And I had to basically take that life apart and make sure that whatever it is that I'm doing is consciously for a higher purpose. And that's really hard to do, like coming out of your little life and going into a bigger field. Like that's scary. You know what I mean? When you're just like,
I can't imagine, of course I talk to a lot of people, but so if I look at my situation, like a lot of people's situations, like you were referring to, everything was ripped away, basically. That's the way I set it up. So everything got ripped away literally overnight. And so all those things that I had to detach from, I didn't really have a choice, it would just happen. Now, if you look at like Morgan, she obviously does everything consciously, and she'd been practicing, practicing that type of thing for a lot longer than I had. Mine just all came very quickly. But it was the same thing. She detached consciously, and then if you look at a lot of the conversations I've had, people have talked about it and they've gone through it one way or the other. What I can't identify with, and blessings are burdens and burdens are blessings. If I look at you, if I look at Julie Dara Roberts, I'm thinking, how in the hell can you go through this transition we call ascension, where you got kids in the house? And I did for a little bit, but we're talking like this is years. And when I did it, I got my girls back after I was on the streets. They were 11 and 12. I only had them for 3 years. It was important, but it created, a lot of, I don't want to say chaos in the bad sense of the word, but it created a lot of opportunities through the chaos that helped me to ascend. But I can't imagine being in your shoes or Julie's shoes, in navigating this transition, the ascension, with all that on my plate. A lot of times Morgan and I look at each other, it's usually me, and I'll say, I'm so glad we don't have any kids here. I don't want any pets. I don't want any kids.
I live vicariously to the nomads like yourself and Rick Jewers and Vera and Augusti, where it's just them that they have to worry about. Yeah. So I do live vicariously through you guys. It's one of those things where it's just you are still responsible for your children. Yeah. My husband's independent. I'm not really responsible for my husband. He's more there to entertain me. So it's not that I'm worried about that. And it's one of those things where it's just there is a balance. There's always a balance of basically, even for the children. Like right now, we're kind of in a homeschool mode. And I was just like, I'm not homeschooling them. Who cares? Like, who cares what the teacher wants them to learn? So right now, we're practicing trade school at home, and Asian style. My kids are now gardeners and maids, which I find way more productive than
you turned a setback into a comeback.
Exactly. I was like, let's teach teach you how to weed whack. And I'm like, for the girl, I'm like, I'll teach you how to do laundry. It's really exciting. So it's one of those things where it's definitely a hard go for anyone that has had a very comfortable small life like me to come out of that and say, holy crap, this is, in order for the collective and humanity to move forward. Not that I'm saving the world. Okay, don't get me wrong. I'm not here to save the world or save you guys. I'm not here to fix you guys either. But the thing is, I still am responsible, just like every single one that's watching, for my life. And that's how we move forward. So part of my lockdown, like my energetic lockdown, where the dragons were very severe, where they're like, you're not moving forward. We're going to throw this at you, this at you, this at you. Every single hour, there's going to be new information, and you're going to pivot with that. Let's see how you dance.
Let's see how you dance.
Yeah, F you, man. You think it's so easy because obviously dragons carry full spectrum. It is easy for them. They could just manifest on that. They don't need to work towards it. But the pivot and the dance is about your inner work. It really has nothing to do with the physicality of your experience. It's about the inside. Were you able to go through all the full emotions? Like in 1 hour, I would go through all of the emotions. It felt like I was hormonally and so unstable. And the hardest emotion is, what's the point? You know what I mean?
Yes.
That is the hardest thing to face when your life is so full. When you hit that point, you're like, what is the point of this? This is no longer fun. If it's not fun, I check out. Like, forget it. You're on your own, buddy. You find some other partner to hang out with. But it's one of those things where it's just like, how do you transmute? What's the point of being here? You know what I mean? Even though you were given everything, like everything. I have no reason to bitch or complain or whine. If my dad heard this, he would slap me upside the head. There would be like a broomstick would come out and there would be Asian beats coming down.
Asian beats.
But it's one of those things where it's just like a lot of people are hitting that pure point where the disconnect is so intense. You don't know why you're even trying.
Yeah, I think everybody can identify with that. I think when you get to the point, I say the point, it's plural. Each time you get to the point where you say, what's the point? That's actually a really good sign. Just based on my experience. I mean, it's kind of like, what did Morgan used to say? You'd have the influx, you'd have a surge, and then you'd kind of go into a crater. You know what I mean? You would kind of like go like that.
Peaks and valley.
Yeah, but when you went down, you were kind of like integrating, I guess. And then there would be a surge after that, So I think she said purge, then you go flat. But I don't remember exactly. But what I'm trying to say is that just like if you get very confused, I mean, I used to tell her all the time, I'm confused. She said, that's good. So like when you get to these points of I don't know what to do, I don't know anything, what's the point? I think that's that's what precipitates the expansion. And what I'm sitting here wondering and watching and totally intrigued by is the collective. Like you see little signs of it, I saw a couple of videos and people were like, there's some semi-protesting and they're saying why. I saw some friend of mine in Kapa'a, in Kauai, with two other ladies holding up signs saying we were protesting this unconstitutional lockdown. So it isn't the superficial thing, it's the energetic of somebody saying, wait a minute, this just doesn't make any sense, whatever that may be. In other words, the pushback. And because I think once we get to a certain point, and I think a lot of people in their personal journeys as they were going through it, I know I did, I would get to a point like, what's the point? I don't know anything. It's not fun anymore. I don't want to be here.
Yeah.
And then you realize you're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
So you kind of, it's kind of like that, the four things you go through with death, right? What is it? Like anger, denial,
grieving.
Yeah. And so, the grieving process. And so it's like that, but I see people kind of like snapping out, snapping and going, you know what? I'm just not going to do that. I'm just not going to do it no matter, like, what are you going to do to me? at some point. I think that's where we're getting led to, like with you by way of the dragons saying, hey, you're going to have to deal with this. You need to deal with this. You're on the fast track, because I think our consciousness has to get to a certain level of acceptance that can only be attained by removing all that crap. And the dragons energy, like the Kali energy, is just coming in and saying it's time to clean house and we're not playing around. So they lock you down for 3 weeks. That's a huge gift. I would imagine that the payoff, so to speak, is going to be realized and experienced. It's going to take, a few days, I would think. How have you felt? Because this just ended, what, 3-4 days ago?
Like I said, I don't feel great for sure. Physically, I'm still working through a lot of the alchemy, because the integration of the energy is very different, right? So the physical vessel has to kind of catch up with that. But the experiences that unfold every single day surprises me. I don't know if it's because I have low expectations now. And I'm like, wow, you want to talk to me? Oh, so fun. So I'm not really sure. But that's the secret to happiness anyways, is to have no expectations of anything, right? So when something happens, you're like highly amused. So it's one of those things where it feels very fast now. So for right now, it feels like I'm doing catch-up work. I don't know how you feel about it, but there's a lot of catch-up to do. And I kind of understand where you're coming from when you're talking about the motion of going up and down. It's like the elastic, you know how you have to like basically bend down and then stretch and basically build, come out of inertia. So that's what I was in. So when it comes to energetics and hygiene of energetics, one of the things is if you're working with intense energy, you cannot keep it or hold it. So that's what causes inertia and stagnancy. So for me, I guess I was doing that for long enough to be on lockdown, where you're just basically hanging out with yourself, dealing with your own shit, which is not a fun thing, especially if you're me. So it's one of those things where it's just like you come out of the inertia, you bring momentum, but part of the momentum is basically stretching yourself way down to all the spectrums of the energy that's present as a human. Now, when our human experience only still a slice of that energy spectrum. But when you go through all of it without breaking, now that's the whole game. You go through all of that, you stretch out, you go through all of it without breaking, then what happens? Just like elasticity, you basically ping up and you shoot. You shoot through a direction you don't even know, like you have no control out of it, right? There's no point to hit or miss, you just shoot. So that's what it feels like right now that everybody's on. So the breaking point is what everyone's going through. Yeah. And that is pretty intense. Like it depends on where you're at. So I love that you and Morgan are hosting this like forum, because you don't have to do it by yourself. That's the other thing. When you're hitting a breaking point and you have awareness that you're hitting a breaking point, the best thing you can do is align yourself with the frequency that can help you stretch without breaking. So the breaking point is like, it's a superficial point. You think you're going to, basically give up or whatever, check out of this lifetime and then enter another dimension that's way more fun. But if you can basically get into alignment and find basically another frequency where you can even stretch your spectrum a little bit more, you can make it. You can not only make it, but you can fly. So that's the secret there. Yeah. So with yours and what you and Morgan have done, which I love, is been curating a community of that frequency. So if you find, Todd has fantastic hair and you find Morgan super amazing, do the forum, because at least they will hold you through that in a space of, I would say, a space of compassion. I'm not going to say it's going to be easy, because that would be total bullshit. It's not going to be easy, but you will have a space to reach out to find other frequencies like you that can help you go through it without actually breaking.
Yeah, I think that's if I look at Soulology, the whole evolution of the 8 or 9 years, whether it was just a group that people posted in or videos and then whatever else it's evolved to, it's never been about me or me and her, or it's actually, that's the way it was given to me 8, 9 years ago. I was actually given, and I wrote it down. It's not an organization, it's an energy. You can call it a portal or a vortex. Well, it's made up of everybody. So it's just imagine like 1,000 tuning forks. And
Mhm.
but really they're multi-dimensional tuning forks, so they have different frequencies making them up. Some of them are lacking this, and some of them are lacking that, and I think that's what you're saying. And this is what we do. We all, one way or the other, conscious or not, human self driving it or the higher self driving it, we find ourselves interacting with other tuning forks, whether it be for a day, somebody walks into your shop and makes a purchase, or somebody who's been a friend for quite a while, like Tien, and they are doing exactly what you're saying. That the only thing is that sometimes we get a cattle prod, you know, stuck in our ass, and sometimes we have this beautiful illuminating emanation of love, pure love and light, or whatever you want to call it. It feels good. Sometimes it
Yes.
doesn't feel good. So I think that's another thing that I'm noticing about people. When I say people, I mean the collective, like what I can see, both online and in the ethers, is that people are less afraid of shadow. They're starting to understand that it has tremendous value. Maybe nothing has more value in this realm at this time. But so like they're losing their fear. I was talking to that guy yesterday who was awesome show, Michael Mejia, and we were talking, and I said it's a lot like children, and you can relate to that, right? So like you have that fear element over children, and as they're getting 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and they push you and they push you and they sneak out and they steal and all that stuff, right?
Mhm.
At some point, in their journey, you no longer scare them, right?
Yeah.
Like the fear-based programming, we're the matrix and they're the unconscious soul. We scare them into our sense of order. Well, at some point, the girls go first. Because
I was going to say, have you met my 9-year-old?
yeah,
I'm scared of my 9-year-old.
exactly right. So at some point, they start to push back, and they either do it covertly or they do it out in the open. But they say, "I'm not afraid of you anymore." So you can't take them into the room and spank their butt. You can't do the things that you used to. You can't stick them in the corner. You can't take away their allowance. I mean, they get to a point where they start to grasp their individuality. They taste freedom and liberation. They go out and do things. They step over the line. And so this is, I kind of think, where we're at. I think we're at a point where the kid, us being the collective kid, is saying to the parent, "Hey man, this is kind of like, what is that old saying? Do what I say, not what I do."
Mhm.
Like, if you're going to set the bar and create the rules, then follow them. And if you're not following them, then either we're going to make our own rules or you need to come into alignment. That's what I was going to ask you about, being around kids now in 2020. And as you're going through this stuff, do they ever, like, just with or without words, do they ever just like bring you back towards center? I'm not saying to center, but towards center, or pull you back into balance just by their presence?
Well, I mean, everything's energetics, right? So of course my children act as that. The biggest one was when I became a mom and Ty was born. So basically I pulled my own head out of my ass when I realized when he was born, nothing at that time that I had value of carried any value. And then that was kind of not my spiritual awakening, but I would say that became my humility. So I birthed my humility with my son. So Ty is really good at reminding me the access point to creation, and I'm not talking about baking a cake or something simple like that. The access point to collective creation, which is huge shifts, is having the humility that you don't know shit. You know what I mean?
Right.
In that space of surrendering in that space of not knowing anything, losing control and all of that, some amazing things happen. So Ty has always been that kind of energetic entrainment for me, I would say was the best word. So
how old is he?
He is 13. So yeah, he's going through the fun stage of preteen where hair grows on places that you don't want to know about and things start smelling funny.
They take long showers and you never have any hot water.
Yeah, exactly. And it's one of those things I'm like, should I knock on this door before I just barge in?
You know, and then being exposed to some children on, you know, directly or indirectly on the show and the impact that they're having on these people's lives like yourself, it's become obvious to me that they're you know, they're carrying a less tainted frequency or a higher frequency, whatever you call it. And I even look back, it's like I remember when I went on the street and my son, one of my kids was supposed to be with me. So he'd stay with me if I had a hotel room, and then he'd stay with his girlfriend if he didn't. But I remember, because I was pretty volatile at the time and up and down, you know, in dimension and in the world and, you know, all the in between. And so I would occasionally, more than occasionally, go off, right?
No,
and he would just, I would
shocking.
go off, right? I would go off. I'm really not doing it anymore, to be honest with you. I'm surprised. But anyway, so I would go off and he would stand there, 16 years old, and he'd look at me and he'd go, "Are you done?" And it would just like bring me right back down. I'd be like, holy shit. You know, I used to call him Zen Master because this is that point you're talking about.
Yes.
That creation point can only be attained when all the shit's gone.
Yes.
So it's like if you're out here in the ethers, or you're out here in you know, a demonstrative emotional meltdown, you're not here. So to be here, like that's why I'm getting now, it's not the human that leads and it's not the higher self that leads. It's both. It really is. That's for me. I'm not saying that's you know, gospel. I'm just saying that's where I'm at over the last couple of weeks, and it feels good, you know.
Yeah. So I find that it'll be interesting to see what happens, because it's just interesting times, because we've never had a situation where the world has been on lockdown. Like we've never had a documented situation in our living history, and it's fascinating how everyone's coping with it, right? So I mean, my parents are pretty old school, and for them, they go into a little bit of their own fragility where they're recognizing they may die again, right? I mean, they've hit a press point way younger when they made the cross from Vietnam to Canada, that they were going to die, and they were at peace at that point. But it's funny now, they're kind of like, well, if you die, you die, not a big deal. Like it's really casual. So the conversations about death around because we still, my parents and my children, we do share meals together regardless of the lockdown. We don't really care. We figured it's genetics anyway, so if we're going to die, we're meant to die. So my parents talk about it openly to my children, and Kaya, who's 9, she's always like, well, if it's time to go, that's okay. I'm sure there's something way more exciting after this. And my dad is like, there is something way more exciting than after this. So you just wait. I will meet you there, and we'll just laugh at everybody sitting around this table that's still stuck here. Wow. And I'm like, it's one of those conversations where it's just, it's an interesting time for sure. One of the things that I'm really hoping, and for all of this, I hope it does not go back to normal. I'm like, for the love of God, do not return back to normal. I'm not going through this.
There's no way.
Yeah.
There's no way. Because one thing we've all learned, okay, but in our journey, is that everything happens energetically first. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, if you look back at even when we were not awake, you know, we would energetically visualize, you know, something, it would eventually manifest, you know. But anyway, so we know that things happen in the energy fields first before they physically manifest. So it's already happened. You've had all these kids pulled out of the institutional educational system. They've tasted freedom. They just accelerated what I was talking about earlier. Now these kids are going to be like, you know, they've had a taste of it. So you have that part. You have people taken out of their routines. I read somewhere yesterday, I can't remember what country it was, half of the people have lost their jobs in the entire country. Okay. And it was a pretty big, pretty good sized country. But anyway, so energetically, it's made an impression, and now it's going to affect us. It's going to affect us. Some people are going to, if it quote unquote goes back to normal, go back to that job and not be able to be there, or
Yeah.
go back to that relationship or not be able to be there. I mean, it's just, it's done, you know. Now how that looks, I don't know, but I think energetically, this has been, to me, and watching everything, it's so interesting. And what you said is true, because um, when you could say World War I, World War II, information moved a lot slower. Okay. Not everybody went through the same thing depending on what side of the war you're on. But this one, everybody's in the same boat. Information's moving like that.
Yes.
Everybody energetically is pretty much going through the same thing. You're taken out of your routine.
Yeah.
You are being controlled. You're being put into solitary confinement, or with people that you've cohabitated with that you may or may not have communicated with, and you're being forced to now. And you know, and so
Those are
yeah,
those
so
are the best ones.
yeah, but you know, everything's supporting the sovereignty, the
Yes.
the enhancement, or a further awareness and realization of sovereignty. So the I am soul thing, you know. Oh, we got to get out of here.
All right.
We should do this again.
With Syed.
Well, we'll get Syed back on. We'll talk to
Yeah.
Rick, and maybe Rick
Yeah,
can help
because
us
one of
out.
the interesting things is I feel somewhere in his archives, this time has been documented. So that was one of the reasons why I'm like, I would love to have the opportunity to talk to.
I just
Right?
got what you said. Now,
Yes.
you said that at the beginning, and I did. It kind of went, but now that you're saying that, because you know, somewhere online I researched quite a bit on Egyptology,
Yes.
and the whole, it's like the Smithsonian with the large skeletons, and they get them and they hide them. But there's a lot of stuff in Egyptology that is not been let out.
Yeah, and for him, his family has always been the original, they call them the custodians or guardians of the pyramids, that he grew up in one of them, but his family lineage has gone all the way back from it. So although his livelihood includes tours for the tourists, he only showcases, I would say, 10% of the information that you probably can find on Google. And then there's 90, it's like the iceberg, right? Like that man is an iceberg. So 90% of that is not given and can only be gifted when it's the right time. So if he's built like some of my great ancestors as well, we've lost a lot of that narrative back then during the war and everything. But if he still has it, like it down in his archive, he has that. So it'd be really interesting to see what this precipice signals for him.
Wow. Yeah, I'm with you on that. We'll get him on. Let's talk to Rick. Let's see if we can get him. Let's do this again sometime.
Okay. Have a great day. Bye.
See you later. Take care. Bye-bye.